Thank you, Siegfried, and thank you for the invite to talk today. Some really interesting talks so far. I'm going to maybe take a slight detour from the theme so far, but actually I think you'll hear one or two of the things that have come out, particularly from Hitesh's talk, but also from Samantha's talk coming back as well. So just to set the scene, I am a chemical engineer. I recognise this as a manufacturing chemist conference, so I don't know whether being a chemical engineer qualifies me or not, but I'll put that out there. But I've been in this role now within Innovate UK for a little over 2 years. I spent exactly 15 years prior to that working with Pharma and Fine Chems in an organisation called Brightest, mainly on manufacturing innovation, which I think is what qualifies me to talk today. But we've touched on the nuclear sector a couple of times already this morning as well, and you'll see there, if you look far enough back in my history, that my industry career actually started out in the nuclear sector as well. I spent 3.5 years up to here in high-level waste at Sellafield for my sins. And to carry on a theme I think that we saw coming out of Hitesh's presentation a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I used to teach chemical engineering as well. I thought I'd just throw that one in there. So, yeah, what I'm going to talk about a little bit this morning, I'll get the corporate stuff out of the way, but I'm going to look a little bit back at medicines manufacturing innovation supported by UK government and sort of where that's got us to at the moment, a little bit about some of the current policy drivers. You know, what did we learn from the pandemic? And again, picking up on some of the points particularly that have sort of come out so far on opportunities, and particularly around innovative engagement with the regulators, I think. And then what is that driving us to do going forward? From the perspective of trying to make medicines more sustainably, but I think coming back to some of the themes, particularly we've heard around Industry 4.0 and how that maybe also supports quality as well. So like I said, I'll get the corporate stuff out of the way. Innovate UK, we are the government's innovation agency. We're a arm's length government body sponsored by the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, as it is now, DSIT, and I'm told I'm not allowed to use a Connery S there. But we're there to support business and really small businesses, but we work with businesses of all sizes to look at innovative manufacturing and translating some of those innovative technologies actually into commercial application and using that to drive business growth through, as it says there, development and commercialization of new products, processes, services, etc., etc. The head of our net zero domain sort of came up with this, which has sort of become the Innovate UK strapline. Like several governments, current and not so long ago, it's 3 words. One of those 3-word straplines. So, it's about inspiring, making the opportunity for what a manufacturing future could look like visible and compelling and exciting and engaging, and that brings on to involving how we use our networks and how we use our colleagues in the knowledge transfer network to make sure we're bringing together the right organisations at the right time to help drive those innovations forward. And then the investment is not just in terms of the grants and other investment products that we offer, but it's also about the people skills within Innovate UK, the knowledge transfer network, Innovate UK Edge, but it's also the catapult centres and the other infrastructure that we support in the UK, the manufacturing innovation centres, and leveraging those to help drive those investments forward. And cheesy graphic time, we are now part of UK Research and Innovation, which brought together, I guess around sort of 4 or 5 years ago now, brought together the research councils and Innovate UK and what was now Research England was the Higher Education Funding Council for England, so brought all of those together under one umbrella, really to try and make sure there's a clear pipeline from blue sky research in academia, through some of the centres that are funded to support sort of translation of manufacturing innovation, through Innovate UK, then and out into commercialisation. So that's how we all sort of link together under the UKRI umbrella. And we work quite closely in our team in medicines manufacturing with the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, the Biology and Biosciences Research Council, and of course the Medical Research Council as well. So I said I'd start with a little bit of a historical perspective, and I guess prior to around about 2016, as far as medicines manufacturing was concerned, there wasn't really a great deal of focused activity within what was then, I guess, just about Innovate UK, and prior to that, what was the Technology Strategy Board. There were a number of funded programs that supported the process industries more broadly. We had the biomedical catalyst, which was very much, I think, targeted more at early stage development, but not a lot around actually supporting the manufacturing industry. And in Brytest, and with one or two familiar faces in the room, we worked on a number of projects with TSB and with Innovate UK support that were, just happened that there was a call there for formulation or for some aspects of manufacturing where we could make an appropriate case to bid for funding. And then in around about 2016, we had the life sciences sector deals, and that just happened to coincide with the transition to the May government and what became the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. And the sector deals were really around industry and government coming together, and industry saying, this is a roadmap for the future, we want to do this, we will co-invest, and government saying, yeah, we will also co-invest in that vision, and we will do that through this instrument that we call the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. And part of that then was a series of industry-led challenges, and in the first wave of those, you can see at the top of the slide, there was a challenge around how we support an ageing society, and one of the responses there was funding for medicines manufacturing technologies. And that was really sort of where I started. So I joined the team a little over 2.5 years ago as we were bringing to a close what was the ISCF Medicines Manufacturing Challenge Fund. And you can see on the slide there the sort of objectives that fund had. The fund started out with around about 150 or so million pounds to invest in a number of activities. It was mainly directed at growing the infrastructure. We'd worked quite closely with the Medicines Manufacturing Industry Partnership, and a lot of the challenges that came out there were to say it would be really good if we had some infrastructure to support translation of some of the manufacturing technologies out of our academic centres into commercial reality. So the research councils had funded things like the CMAC Centre, led by Strathclyde. We'd got the VAX hubs. What we were lacking was some of that translational capability to take their manufacturing innovations out into industry. So we said, well, we need things like a Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre, a Vaccines Manufacturing Innovation Centre, and that's probably as much as I'll say on that topic this morning. We need expansion of the cell and gene therapy catapult. We need to look at how we support advanced therapies getting into the beyond the clinic and actually into application in the NHS, so the advanced therapy treatment centres. But we also ran some CR&D programmes. And about, I guess, sort of 18 or so months into the establishment of this challenge, COVID hit, and things changed quite quickly. In that we became recognised, I think, as a vehicle for enabling a rapid UK response to the pandemic. Some of the investments that we'd made were quite key in terms of getting the AZ Oxford vaccine manufactured quite quickly. So the funding that came through the challenge was increased quite significantly. But it was recognised, I think, as quite a successful challenge, not just because of the COVID response, but because of some of the investments that we'd made and the sustainability of those investments, from both an industry and I guess a UK capability perspective. So some of the highlights of the challenge, I mentioned already the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre. which is a unique facility still globally for showcasing small molecule manufacturing technologies. The Advanced Therapy Treatment Centres, again, a kind of unique model globally that's now been replicated in other jurisdictions to support the adoption of advanced therapies. Very strong skills program, particularly again in the advanced therapy space, and we're sort of looking now at how we roll that out more broadly across pharmaceutical manufacturing. The investments in the Cell and Gene Therapy Manufacturing Innovation Centre at Stevenage have grown GMP capability for manufacturing advanced therapies. And again, the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre will also be GMP capable, so it will be really showcasing those technologies in a real-world environment. And I think it's fair to say we've grown a strong medicines manufacturing innovation community as well, which, as we go into our sort of next programs, we'll be looking to grow even further. And all of this is great, but at the time, I think it's fair to say that sustainable manufacturing wasn't really on the agenda. And when I was putting these slides together, I look back at the business case for some of these investments, and it's sort of, clear that, productivity, yes, increasing speed to patient, yes, sustainability, there's not a lot there. But that's not to say that what these centres are doing isn't supporting sustainable manufacturing. So looking specifically at some of the activities that have been supported through the MMIC, so the MMIC, with the figure there, 56 million, I think was the business case figure. I think if you look at what MMIC is doing, it's leveraged probably about 80 million now from co-investment from ourselves in Innovate UK and Scottish Enterprise, investment from AstraZeneca and GSK directly into the 56 million, and then other pharma companies have come in to invest as well. It's sited in the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation District Scotland, or Glasgow Airport. To those of you who are wondering where that is, literally if you want to walk from Glasgow Airport to MMIC you can, as you don't mind the smell of after. But they're running a number of grand challenge programs to look at addressing manufacturing, big manufacturing challenges in the small molecules, and starting to move as well into the biologic space as well. But again, if you look at what they're doing, there's a grand challenge around continuous direct compression and using digital twins as the means of implementing those processes on the line. So they've got a full-scale CDC line that they can use as a demonstrator, but the idea is use the digital twin to design the process, prove then that works, and then that gives you an alternative way of accelerating CDC. The business case said, reduction in time to market, reduction in development costs. But if we think about that from a net zero perspective, what that's also saying is we're reducing the amount of energy and material that we need to develop that product and get it to market. So it's not written in the business case, but there is a benefit for our resource efficiency by doing this. Grand Challenge 2 is looking at robotic technologies for just-in-time clinical pharmacy. And again, the business case was all around fast targeted delivery of a variety of trials products to individual patients. So getting towards something that Hitesh mentioned earlier, which is a kind of batch size of one. This is a sort of technology that starts to enable some of that. But again, that's giving us potentially material and energy efficiency improvements. So again, as a resource efficiency driver towards net zero. We're starting to get a bit closer to net zero as a business case when we look at GC3, which is around oligonucleotide manufacturing. The primary business case for this was the deal that NHS did with Novartis for inclisiran, which you may remember a couple of years back, coming up about 18 months or so ago now. Inclisiran was improved on by NICE as an alternative to statin therapy. The challenge there is that oligonucleotides can't be manufactured at those sort of patient scales, at least not without using up vast sources of really quite horrible solvents. So, the idea of having a challenge to address novel manufacturing processes for these types of therapies, gives us, hopefully, improvements in process mass intensity, solvent use, so again, net zero benefits. There's also a grand challenge around digital pharma factories. So this is moving beyond the process scale now and looking at the facility level. Obviously the business case driver for this was demonstrating some of the Pharma 4, Pharma 5 concepts that we've heard about already this morning, looking at how we gather appropriate data and have those robust quality management systems in place, but also how we use that information to reduce the facility carbon footprint as a driver. One of the things I think that has changed significantly since we ran the Medicines Manufacturing Challenge Fund is the government innovation policy context. And some of these documents I think are now on their third government, but that's not to say that the policy drivers themselves have changed. So the innovation policy from what was BEIS and now DCIT is still around supporting transition to net zero. We're still looking at these mission-led approach to grand societal challenges, of which healthy living is one, but improving our carbon footprint is another. We still have a strategy around supporting businesses to reduce the cost of low carbon technologies and really implement those. But I think for our sector, the key one is the life sciences vision. And there is a statement in the life sciences vision, which was published again just about 2 years ago now, that specifically draws out working with pharmaceutical manufacturers to improve the carbon footprint of medicines manufacturing. So we have kind of a kind of innovation policy context there from government, but I think there's also what we might refer to as a customer-led policy context that we have to bear in mind as well. And I think people in the room will be familiar with this document from the NHS around having a net zero national health service. And I think they state in that document they want to be completely carbon neutral by 2045, but they are ramping that up very steadily and very shortly. They're looking at, is it realistic to have a sort of close to net zero medicine supply by 2030 or 2035, with impacts all the way back along the supply chain. And the other document that you'll see on there is the Innovate UK Plan for Action, which is looking at this sort of great soup of innovation policy, and it's the Innovate UK response to that, which singles out how we will start to address some of these things. But I want to come back and look at the NHS policy in a bit more detail. So, as I said, become net zero by 2045. They've, I believe, launched now the Sustainable Supplier Framework, which has a series of stage gates, if we want to look at them that way, over the next several years to show how the drugs that are supplied into the NHS have net zero supply chains. Not surprisingly, and I think not just driven by this, but driven by a number of other factors, a lot of pharma companies now have come out and publicly stated what their net zero targets are. I mean, that's to be applauded. But it's interesting, this was a very quick survey I did of the sort of top 4, I think, or top 5 global pharmaceutical manufacturers, just to get a sort of view of what their emissions were. And looking at that spread, you find that they're stating that depending on which figures you look at, somewhere between 85 or 97% of their carbon emissions are scope 3, which means that they're not directly emitted by those organisations or indirectly emitted by those organisations as a result of their energy use. They are indirect emissions that are in the supply chain, so they're somebody else's scope 1. And those somebody else's are the CDMOs, the fine chemicals companies, the raw material suppliers, which is where we sort of need to start to look for opportunities, I think, to help reduce carbon in medicine supply chains. So there's a big driver there. The pandemic. taught us quite a lot, I think, and gave us, I think, some interesting opportunities as well. So the first thing, when we sort of look at, well, what has the pandemic taught us about the way we manufacture and supply medicines in the UK? Well, we learnt that the regulatory system can respond quite quickly. Not only could the manufacturers respond quickly to get us a vaccine manufactured in whatever it was, 320 odd days from sequencing the virus, but the regulatory system could move quickly as well to enable that to happen. And I think we've heard already, particularly from Samantha's talk, that there is a desire for the regulators to sort of continue in this trend and actually start to engage more quickly with companies on an innovation pathway. So it's not just about the medicines, it's also about the manufacturing process. And MHRA and FDA, I've heard both of those organisations say openly to manufacturing communities, we would like to be involved at a very early stage to understand what the innovation is and how we can help you implement it, rather than the fait accompli that kind of comes at the end, which says we've got a big file of data where we know everything there is to know about making this medicine and look how good we are, which seems to be the kind of classic industry approach. So there's a willingness from the regulators to engage in this innovation journey. We also learned, of course, that particularly the UK, we're quite susceptible to offshore supply chains, and it's probably not credible to look at reshoring all of those, but we are sort of seriously looking with colleagues in DHSC at, what are the critical medicines where we need to have a more guaranteed UK supply for these things. And that's going to mean some investment. And if we look at that, that gives us an opportunity perhaps to invest in innovative, sustainable technologies where we can bring the regulators along with us and we can build this resilience in our supply chains whilst addressing some of the challenges around sustainable manufacturing, or some of the opportunities around sustainable manufacturing is maybe a better way to put it. Again, I'm not going to dwell on this one. People will, I think, recognise the way our supply chains are generally made around a make-to-stock model using the multi-purpose batch plant, typically in small molecule. That is changing. I think if you look at the sort of resource efficiency arguments, we've got a lot of strengths, obviously, as to why we've historically used these ways of manufacturing things. But from a resource efficiency perspective, and to some extent actually a quality perspective as well in some cases, there are also a number of weaknesses, and you can read the slides offline if you want to drill into that in more detail. But this was something I saw on social media when I was pulling a similar set of slides together for another meeting, and I thought it sums up our industry quite well, I think, in terms of the way we treat materials across our supply chain, and it shows you maybe just how crazy things could be at times. So as I say, I've been involved in this sector now for the thick end of about 20 years, and most of that in projects to do with innovation around pharma and fine chemicals manufacturing, but quite a heavy pharma manufacturing bias. And that's just a snapshot of some of the activities I've been involved in. But I think the message here is that there's been a lot of investment from Europe, from the UK through Technology Strategy Board, Innovate UK, yes, it does make me, I guess, sort of poacher-turned gamekeeper in some respects. But I think what this says is we've sort of built the pieces of the jigsaw to enable a lot of the innovations that we need to enable sustainable manufacturing to happen, both in terms of the technologies that will help us get there, but I think also some of the methodology and standards work that enables us to implement them sensibly. So as we were getting to the end of the medicines manufacturing challenge, and starting to think about what as Innovate UK do we feel we need to ask government for next in order to support the sector. Andy Jones, who some of you will know, our former challenge director, my former boss, we started to talk about these agile, flexible, scalable manufacturing concepts. So by which we mean being able to respond quickly and economically to urgent requests for medicine supplies. That gives us our resilience. Flexible so that we maintain some of those operating advantages of the sort of current supply chains, being able to rapidly reconfigure processes to manufacture a variety of products. Scalable so that we can address match with supply to patient demand. But again, we then sort of start to think, well, there's another S in here that we need to build in, which is the sustainable bit, which is using these technologies to give us all of those benefits, but also to enable us to improve that overall resource efficiency. I think there's a couple of people, at least in the room, myself included, who bear the scars of what was the European F3 factory project. This really grainy image at the bottom of the slide is one of these flexible, agile, scalable manufacturing concepts that came out of a European project. This is actually a facility that sits at Bayer site in Leverkusen. What you can see almost at the front with the number 3 on it is some modular manufacturing kit. I think there's a reactor and a feed tank there that are clearly visible. Number 2 is a 20-foot ISO container framework with modular manufacturing process in. Believe it or not, there's 4 stages of a 5-stage pharma process in that container. The 2 containers you can see at the back are a high viscous polymer manufacturing kit, which was completely solvent-free, making polymers without solvents. Which shows the flexibility of the concept, all of which dock into this standard utilities piece. So these sorts of concepts exist. And again, when we look at activities that have been supported to look at these types of manufacturing concepts, there were 2 projects actually that Europe funded in the early 2010s. Pfizer at least have gone public with their own investments in their Ringaskiddy site, which I think they're also now taking forward into manufacturing, not just development. And indeed, through the Medicines Manufacturing Challenge, we funded projects, particularly with what is now Quotient Sciences at their site in Alnwick, to look at similar things. But they enable, say, some of these sustainable supply chain concepts to potentially be realised. So that was sort of at the heart of what we're doing now, which is a program we're calling Transforming Medicines Manufacturing, and really sort of investing in 3 key areas: how we accelerate medicines development and manufacturing, robust, agile, sustainable supply chains, and coming, I guess, a bit towards Industry 5 and some of the concepts that Hitesh was talking about earlier, patient-centric formulation and delivery, so putting the patient at the heart of what we do, all of which is underpinned by the skills piece, the EDI piece, but also net zero. From an Innovate UK perspective, we're saying that we will not only will we not invest in technologies that aren't going to have a resource efficiency benefit, we're actually through our competitions asking organisations to measure what the impact of their innovation is as part of getting our funding. We've got in our business cases to government, we're measuring some of this, and we think that's going to be important going forward. But I think from this sort of roadmap for what we want to invest in over the next several years, we talk about 3 years as being the sort of current spending review, but we want to invest in a number of things in the current and future spending reviews as well. So, process development, digital design, we've heard a lot about this already, digital twins, automation in manufacturing and in the laboratory as well, which hopefully, if done correctly, start to enable us to reduce the waste that we generate during development and manufacturing, so we get that resource efficiency benefit. The data is great. It's about having the right data, I think, and using the data in the right way. But having the technologies and the confidence to enable us to implement the technologies to be able to get that information. Through into manufacturing, again, improved process sensors, process analytics, continuous processing as a more routinely used technology, resource-efficient platform processes across the piece, looking at opportunities to reuse materials and solvents. I think there's a particular opportunity within our sector to look at reuse of solvent rather than disposal, all of which, again, will help us reduce the carbon footprint of our processes, but also help us increase productivity as well. And again, across the supply chain, can we start to move towards decentralized manufacturing concepts? Can we introduce novel dosage forms that are both easier for the patient to engage with and have a better manufacturing carbon footprint? Again, data, digitalisation, Pharma 4 to Pharma, or Industry 5.0 is a big player here, but hopefully enabling us to have better utilisation of medicines and reducing the inherent waste in current supply chains. So if we come back to some of those drivers then from the NHS document, what I've been trying to show here is that through the investments we want to make through our Transforming Medicines Manufacturing programme, hopefully we can start to help address some of the challenges that NHS have set out to industry in order to help them achieve their ambition of net zero medicine supply by 2045 through supply chain management, manufacturing productivity, and reducing the waste in manufacturing and development. But I think it's also important as a sector to remember that Innovate UK and UKRI do more than just support medicines manufacturing. There are a number of other activities going on, some that are still sort of, I guess, orphans of ISCF, as we're not allowed publicly to talk about ISCF now, and I might get shot by Indro for standing here and mentioning those very words. But we do still have challenge funds, the Made Smarter Innovation Challenge Fund. So this is looking at some of the bigger opportunities around smart factories, automation and digital twins, and we've sort of worked quite closely with them. We've sort of drawn this distinction between factory level, facility level activities has been in the Made Smarter space, but process level activities and to some extent development level activities have been within the medicines manufacturing space. Driving the electric revolution, this is looking at next generation power electronics and drives. So they're engaging quite a lot with the automotive sector, the marine sector, the rail sector, but at the end of the day, they're talking about electric motors. Anybody who's been on a manufacturing facility will know there are a hell of a lot of those stirring tanks, driving pumps, etc., etc. So again, we're looking at what we can learn from some of the innovations coming through in the big sectors to how we can improve the efficiency of power electronics and drives in manufacturing. I've had some very interesting conversations with the people at McLaren Automotive about this. Obviously, they've got a big driver for high-speed electric cars, but they're also very interested in how they can use their technology in other sectors, and I think there's some opportunities there. Going back to the sort of Scope 1, Scope 2 emissions from the sector, there's a lot around industrial energy. And Ofgem have a strategic innovation fund which is managed by Innovate UK, which is looking at how we as extorted energy payers in the UK can actually support innovation in the grid. So again, it's looking at digitalisation, it's looking at low carbon thermal energy in industry as well, and supporting some of those as well. So we can signpost to some of these other activities that support sort of bigger picture carbon footprint improvement in the sector. So just to wrap up, recognising I'm standing between you and coffee, the Medicines Manufacturing Challenge is where we came from. It was kind of the first big investment, I guess, by Innovate UK and UKRI in pharmaceutical manufacturing. It was quite successful, and whilst its business case wasn't around sustainable manufacturing, actually it's delivering quite a lot in terms of, it's delivered quite a lot in terms of how the sector can reduce its carbon footprint. We have a very strong net zero component in our current innovation policy, both from government and specifically from NHS as a public procurement organisation. What I've tried to talk about this morning is some of the opportunities that we see as UKRI and as Innovate UK and how we can work with the sector to support the development and implementation of some of these enabling technologies. And with that, thank you for your time. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Well, I have a question for you. Do you have a lot of companies coming to you and asking to work with you, getting your support? Do they know about you?
We do, yes. We do have a lot of companies. We engage through the knowledge transfer network. We engage through our own networks. What we find is that in the competitions that we've run so far under this Transforming Medicines Manufacturing Programme, they are oversubscribed. We have more high quality bids for innovation than we can support. So one of our activities now opposite government is, can we have some more money please? Because there's an appetite for this sort of stuff. But yeah, we're very well networked. Obviously we know through the Medicines Manufacturing Industry Partnership we work quite closely with the large pharma companies, but also through organisations such as the Bioindustries Association. That gets us known amongst a lot of the SMEs as well, both in terms of developers, innovative biotechs, and also technology providers as well.
Thank you.
Thanks for your talk, Mark. How successful would you say it is now that we've moved to UKRI in transferring really good ideas out of academia and industrialising them and supporting their industrialisation?
That's a really good question, JP. Thank you for that. Speaking from a purely personal perspective, I think we can do better, and we're starting to do better. One of the things that the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund was established to do was to encourage cross-UKRI cooperation. So, as I said, UKRI came together as the research councils, Innovate UK, which was historically always independent of the research councils, but with a view to driving exactly that sort of behaviour, looking at what are the the really big advances that are coming from academia that have commercial legs, and giving that, supposedly driving that pipeline. Because we were a wave one challenge, I think it's fair to say that we probably didn't capitalise on that as much as we could have. If you look at some of the later ISCF challenges, the research councils are working a lot more closely integrated. One of the things we are looking at now for implementation of kind of second phase of our activities, which are ongoing, but also as we go into the next spending review period, is can we work with the research councils to develop a much more coherent strategy for spending review that says, we've invested through the research councils in these academic centres of excellence, we've invested through Innovate UK in the catapults and the innovation centres. What we want to do now is have a supplier funding that will drive that pipeline through academia, through the catapults, and then out into industry. So we are doing a lot more in that now. We're in active conversations at the minute with EPSRC, BBSRC and MRC around that sort of strategy for next spending review, but also recognising where there are sort of current underspends in some of those organisations that could help us to achieve some of our aims as well. So those are active conversations at the minute. So it's getting better, but I think there's work to do.
Thanks, Mark, for the input. So I'm François Dich from Schneider Electric. You mentioned quite a few catapults I've been to, the MRC just a minute ago. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of overlap between what has been done across the catapult on the whole UKRI network, or anyway, UK MedSmarter and so on. Mm-hmm. What we found in our end users, our end users, that there's always the same questions about applications architectures, data structuring, and it seems that the knowledge is scattered on the UKRI side, so it's kind of joins the previous question. So is there a plan to kind of have suggestions for end users about what good looks like in terms of application architecture, digital architectures, and so on?
So I think the answer to that is in part yes, and I think that's something that the Made Smarter challenge in particular is looking at. They have invested in a smart manufacturing data hub, which is looking at some of these things and best practice. I guess what I'm not seeing at the minute from that, to your point, is how joined up that is across the various catapults. Because you have, for example, the digital catapult, the high-value manufacturing catapult, and increasingly, I would say, the cell and gene therapy catapult, who are all starting to look at various aspects of that. So since our new CEO joined pretty much 2 years ago to the day, I think, Indro's been in post now, we've started to look at the relationship we have with the catapults and how we can make that work better for both government funding but also for industry engagement as well. I think through that there is probably an opportunity to try and drive a bit more joined up thinking around that and have some kind of joint position statements on A, what that could look like, and B, on how industry should and could engage with that. So does that sort of start to answer the question?